Genesis chapter 2, verse 4. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created in the day that Jehovah God made the earth and the heavens. Now, why is God speaking of the generations of the heavens and of the earth? The word generations, Strong's number in the Hebrew, 8435, this particular word is used not all that many times, but everywhere else, every other time this word is used, it's always in relationship to people. It's used, for instance, in Genesis 5, verse 1. This is the book of the generations of Adam. Or in Genesis 6, verse 9. These are the generations of Noah. In Genesis 10, verse 1. Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood. Not only is it always used in relationship to people, but it's used to recount their descendants, the ones that are begotten by them. So it's a word that would have relationship to a genealogy. Well, why is God speaking of the generations of the heavens and of the earth and using that word, generations? And again, it goes back to the picture, the spiritual picture that God is illustrating, that he has painted with the creation of the heavens and the earth. Remember back in verse 1 of this chapter, thus the heavens and the earth were finished. Verse 2 said, God ended his work. And that related to Hebrews 4 verse 3, the works were finished from the foundation of the world. So the work of God was performed in 6 days, and God is relating that to the work Jesus performed, the work of faith, in dying for his people's sins, making payment for those sins, and establishing their lives and providing salvation for them. Well, what's the connection? How do these elect, perhaps as many as 200 million, all whose sins were laid upon Christ and paid for, and thus God was obligated from the point of Christ rising from the dead to save each and every one of them? What relationship do they have to this creation of the heavens and the earth? Well, when Jesus did die before the world began, the foundation of the world was before God created, then God established the spiritual lights of the gospel, the sun, moon, and stars, and it was as though he put the stars in the sky, because he likens the body of believers to the stars of heaven. As he said to Abram at that time, your seed will be as the stars of heaven for multitude. And this act of faith, this work of Christ, the work that he finished at the foundation of the world when he became the Lamb slain and satisfied the demands of God's law for these people, it was as though a new heaven and a new earth were formed and created, as God uses the elect as figures of the stars and also as figures of New Jerusalem, which he ties in with the new earth. For example, let's go to Isaiah 65, verse 17. It says, therefore, behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former shall not be remembered nor come into mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing and her people a joy. The Lord relates the creation of a new heavens and a new earth to the creation of New Jerusalem. And New Jerusalem, we know for a fact, is a type and figure of the body of believers, or the elect of God. Remember, we read in Revelation 21, the first couple of verses, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So God gives the Apostle John a vision concerning the new heaven and the new earth, which the chapter opens with that statement, but then it immediately transfers to the New Jerusalem, who's likened to the bride, and that's because she's the bride of Christ, as all the people that God has saved form the woman, the bride, that Eve typified. And then as we read the rest of the chapter, when we're reading about this city, we would expect to be reading about the new heaven and new earth. Well, we are. The city is the new heaven and new earth. That is, God is writing in a way that they're synonymous. The new heaven and new earth is the New Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a place, isn't it? It's a city. It's a land. And the word earth in the book of Isaiah, in Isaiah 65, where God says, I create a new earth, that's the same word translated as land in many cases. And God says earlier in Isaiah 62 that he's married to the land. He's married to the earth, the new Jerusalem. And I wouldn't know how to carry that any further. Well, we, of course, expect God to create a new creation. He tells us that. And God's people will be joyously experiencing that new creation for eternity future. But that doesn't mean God is not making the association. That doesn't mean he's not linking the two together. That the body of believers are linked synonymously with the new heavens and the new earth. And therefore, when God says these are the generations of the heavens and the earth, he's not speaking only about this present world and universe, but he's speaking of that which will come forth from it. Just as sons of Adam, the generations of Adam, or sons of Noah, their descendants come forth from them. So also will come forth from this present heavens and earth a new heavens and a new earth that are established in the same point. I almost said time, but it was before time, in eternity past, at the foundation of the world, when the Lord Jesus Christ rose from the dead to be that gospel light, to be the day of salvation. That's the day that Jehovah God made a new heaven, the heavens and the earth.